Thank you very much. For adults and girls, the onset of puberty brings additional threats. Poverty and discriminatory cultural norms can restrict girls' life choices and exclude them from educational, social, and economic opportunities. Each year, an estimated 23 million adults and girls become pregnant. Maternal mortality, in many cases linked to marriage, child marriage, is a leading cause of death for girls aged between 15 and 19. Female genital mutilation can also cause life-threatening health complications, which is still an issue that we are facing globally, unfortunately. Many girls in Turkey, especially those from vulnerable groups or low socioeconomic status, continue to face pressure to fill traditional gender roles and are at particular risk of entering into child, early, or forced marriage. For those of you who may not be familiar, the legal age of marriage in Turkey is 18, and children can marry at the age of 17 with the consent of their parents or legal guardians. Children at the age of 16 can also marry with special permission from the courts under exceptional circumstances and on vital grounds. Despite the rising average age of marriage, child marriage remains an ongoing challenge in Turkey, especially with the COVID-19 pandemic, and reflects a pattern of gender inequality that reinforces stereotypical roles for girls and curtails their education, compromises their health, and exposes them to the risk of violence and poverty. And I know you're hearing this a lot, but we have to take action. Change is indeed needed. Therefore, I would like to present you a good practice of UNICEF and their work in Turkey to combat and respond to child marriage. UNICEF has a partnership with the Ministry of Family, Labor and Social Services at the central level and implements child marriage prevention and response model in Gaziantep and Kilis, intending to expand it to other provinces, targeting refugees and local communities. The model includes key interventions to effectively prevent and respond to child marriage, such as identifying leading factors of child marriage, identifying barriers to the elimination of child marriage, developing mechanisms for the identification and management of cases of child marriage, mapping of available services across the continuum of care, and increasing the local service providers' capacities to prevent and respond to child marriage. Through this practice, comprehensive training programs were developed and community-based trainings to positive social norm changes were conducted. The UN Joint Program on the Elimination of Child, Early, and Forced Marriage was initiated under the leadership of UNICEF with the interventions of other UN agencies. This program takes a multi-sectoral approach to the challenge of eliminating child marriage. I believe these kinds of practices, good examples and implementations may be the key answer regarding advocacy and taking action in that sense. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and thank you for providing this important perspective. For our next question, I would like to address the Honorable State Secretary Ivan Gheorghiu from Moldova. So, COVID-19 is undermining adolescents' well-being in all countries, but how are adolescents and young people specifically affected in Moldova? And what do you think needs to be prioritized to mitigate the impacts of this pandemic? Maybe you could give us concrete examples of multi-sectoral investments that you are currently planning that align with areas of adolescent well-being. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. It is true that the pandemic undermines the well-being of adolescents and the young people in Moldova, as it does all over the world. But we must not forget that it is not only young people who are affected. Therefore, I believe that this test is primarily one of solidarity, social cohesion, and accountability for each and every one of us. In this regard, I believe that the government program implemented should not only to respond to an ad hoc need, but to bring the education element to strengthen communities and build resilient societies. It is imperative that we develop sustainable mechanisms that will ensure prompt state intervention when necessary in order to respond to the ever-changing challenges of young people. Regarding the national experience of efforts are currently focused on development of co-management mechanisms or on strengthening the dialogue between young people and institutions, but also on program focused on young people from disadvantaged background or no man left behind, especially in a pandemic context, represent ground zero for any development policy and program. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Now I would like to ask Celine. Celine, you briefed us on some of the work the United Nations has been doing. We heard now about policies and programs to promote adolescent well-being that governments are working on. So I would like to ask you, how do you see adolescents and youth potentially facilitating governments' efforts in line with this framework? And how could we address all 5 domains to bring the change that we are looking for?
Thank you for this brilliant question. And to answer this question, I would like to look at the bigger picture and give concrete action plans to ensure the substantive and meaningful participation of adults and girls, not only on this one, but in every framework the governments prepare and in every step we take to create meaningful change. First of all, promoting and guaranteeing the involvement of children and adolescents in a real rather than a symbolic way is very important, talking from experience. We need to recognize children and adolescents under 18 years as subjects of rights and not only as objects of protection. Therefore, they must be active subjects and frameworks that governments and organizations that are preparing. This means that communications and calls are addressed directly to the organizations led by girls, adolescents, and youths that have an impact at the local, regional, or even international level. Youth, adolescent girls can certainly can act as a linking bridge, that's for sure. But however, it is important to underline that each of these groups have their own voices and decisions. As one of the contributors to the Young Feminist Manifesto, we demand that children's and adolescents' participation in these spaces is guided by an intersectional and diverse perspective. The processes of preparing the frameworks and action plans for governments and organizations must ensure the engagement of those who have coped with these problems and experienced them so that the officials can take actions more realistically. Governments cannot keep trying to come up with frameworks for adults and girls' well-being in a bureaucratic manner. If we really want to ensure that we are not leaving anyone behind, we have to take into consideration that each individual has different realities, different experiences, and different needs. Unfortunately, in many cases, ensuring diversity and inclusion seems as a burden for governments or organizations or even famous companies. And tokenism is a whole another problem that we're facing. That's another topic. But at the end of the day, isn't our differences what makes each of us unique? Every voice matters, and it is governments and organizations' responsibility to ensure that. So yes, we have to hold them accountable. I think that is very important. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Celine. And as you have said, adolescents and youth, girls, they want to be the part of the solution. Hence, I would like to direct the question to the government representatives. Following up on this, how do you think governments can work with us, adolescent and young people, to use this framework to strengthen the government's efforts to design the programs for adolescents? Honorable Deputy Minister, what are your thoughts?
Yes, thank you for these questions. Well, as we all know, due to the necessary of distancing, digital technologies became more and more relevant. However, disparities exist in terms of availability of ITS. Overcoming this gap in the use of digital technologies and media literacy is crucial for ensuring equal changes for all. Young people in rural and remote areas and those with fewer opportunities are especially vulnerable to this effect. Adequate support for education, employment, health, social inclusion, civic participation should be made available for all adolescents. Here comes the role of the youth workers. Therefore, the importance of youth work in all aspects of young people's life should be emphasized.
Thank you so much. Honorable State Secretary, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, as I previously mentioned, establishing and developing co-management structure represent a priority around which our national efforts are focused within youth policies. At both central and local level, we believe that young people need to be a part of process of identifying the challenges they face and generating solutions. I would like to mention that during the last 5 years, the Ministry of Education has been implementing a program of assistance for development of youth councils. At the moment, this council cover 70% of Moldavian district, which I consider to be a good result. However, we must be aware that the reluctance to accept young people as a decision maker is just part of the process of changing the approach of public institutions. This will most certainly not happen overnight. That is why I invite or even insist that young people demonstrate verticality, insistence, and perseverance. If you want to be a part of solutions, accept the difficulties of the process. In this context, at national level, we will continue to promote policies that will empower our youth to engage in the decision-making process, thus strengthening participatory democracy.
Thank you so much, State Secretary. Indeed, this is not going to be an overnight process, and we are still some way along it. However, we are moving forward. And now I would like to address this question not only to our youth representative, but also to our audience who can also respond in the chat. You heard the Deputy Minister and the State Secretary reflecting on the challenges being faced by adolescents in their respective countries. So I would like now to ask you, what are your words of advice, or what are some potentially missing pieces of the puzzle that you would like to highlight? So while I'm asking this question also for the audience, I would like now to direct this question to our youth representative, Celine.
Thank you very much. Maybe not particularly a missing piece of puzzle, but as an adolescent girl from Turkey and from our region in general, I strongly believe that, unfortunately, our mental health is not being prioritized or being taken into consideration, I would say, by governments or institutions. Mental health disorders in adults and girls are a significant problem, relatively common. According to ACOG, at least 1 in 5 youth aged 9 to 17 years currently has a diagnosable mental health disorder. And it's very interesting fact is that these disorders may cause some degree of impairment. The most common mental illnesses in adolescents are anxiety, mood, attention, and behavior disorders. Suicide is the second leading cause of death in young people aged 15 and 24 years, with a rate of 13.9 deaths by suicide in this population per day. But despite these data, the needed actions are still not being taken, especially with the COVID-19 pandemic. Young adults have experienced several consequences, from closures of schools to loss of income, that may contribute to poor mental health. Actually, according to a new research that I was reading the other day, during the pandemic, a larger than average share of young adults has reported symptoms of anxiety and or depressive disorder. Compared to all adults, young adults were already at high risk of compared to all let me rephrase compared to all adults, young adults are more likely to report substance use and suicides, unfortunately. Before the pandemic, young adults were already at high risk of poor mental health and substance use disorder, though many did not receive treatments. With the pandemic, the percentage continues to rise day by day. Therefore, I believe highlighting the importance of mental disorders is crucial. Especially governments and even schools should take action, fund, create concrete plans, and implement them on mental health and awareness of mental health diseases so that adolescents who are facing these issues can be detected and necessary treatments can be provided. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. So it is evident that action is needed now. It is needed as soon as possible, and governments will be meeting in July for a high-level gathering, looking at what needs to be done for the COVID-19 recovery, and as well as to accelerate the process for sustainable development. So having in mind these 5 domains, I would like once again to encourage our audience to share their thoughts on the chat, having in mind that your answers will contribute to the Voices of Youth report, to the high-level reporting on sustainable development in July. And now our panel is almost off to an end. And now I would like to ask the final question to all our panelists. Linked to the call to action and well-being framework, what main priorities would you like to see included for adolescents in these important meetings? I would like to start with Celine.
Thank you. I don't want to echo myself, but to kind of add another layer, like many topics that are about, that include adults and girls or youth-led organizations per se, strengthening political commitment and funding is once again crucial. I would also like to see safe platforms on a national level to empower adults and girls. Platforms that adults and girls can gain confidence to demand their rights and hold governments, institutions accountable. Having adults and girls on the forefront benefits us all at the end of the day. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Now I would like to give the floor on the same question on the main priorities to be included to the Honorable State Secretary Ivan Georgiou. The floor is yours.
Thanks. Personally, I strongly believe that focusing international policies on young people that comes from a disadvantaged background should represent a priority. In this, our statement must be backed by our will and firm commitment, develop mechanism for social and financial inclusion. This pandemic has divided our lives into before and after. And the way we will show solidarity and respond to the needs of those most disadvantaged will define tomorrow's society. The Sustainable Development Goals can be achieved only by working together, and it is time to put our money where our mouth is achieve them. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And now I would like to invite the Honorable Deputy Minister, Nikolai Pavlov. The floor is yours.
Thank you. So, well, main priorities, as I said, education, employment, health, social inclusion, civic participation for the young people. And in order to provide this adequate support, I believe that the government should put into place a specific intersectoral strategy, setting the main priorities and instruments for addressing young people's concerns in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic. We have to encourage specific efforts to gather information. It's very important information in order to develop analysis of the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic on youth and the youth sector. The sustainable recovery that countries need in the period of the COVID-19 aftermath should be applied at different levels in order to be successful. The Bulgarian National Youth Policy is in progress of revision due to the expiration of the National Youth Strategy this year in 2020. With the new National Youth Strategy 2021-2030, we use the opportunity to foresee measures that could guarantee a smooth transition of young people to the new normal. The Ministry of Youth and Sports of the Republic of Bulgaria welcomes the approach of the UN Youth Strategy, Youth 2030, working with and for young people, where the very name suggests the basic idea of the strategy, to work with young people and for them. The active participation of young people and listening to their voices in the development of youth policies is essential in the process of shaping these policies. I believe that coordinated actions aimed at addressing the consequences of the pandemic to young people and youth organizations are very needed, including through various recovery instruments, horizontal economic measures, and funding mechanisms and schemes at national and international level. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you to our esteemed speakers for your brilliant interventions. Just before wrapping up our breakout room, I would also like to just note some of the comments we received from the audience. So one of the comments mentions mental health and that dealing with mental health for either young or old is complex and complicated, and also the role of societal support, especially that of family, is a way to deal with it and should be highlighted. And we also have another comment, which is talking about the creation of meaningful space for younger adolescents to engage, shape policies, and exert their agency. Also, as was mentioned by some of the speakers today, taking an intersectional and rights-based approach to participation and accountability, as well as creating spaces that are intergenerational and perhaps not only youth adolescents. If anyone from the audience would still like to contribute, you still have the chance to do so.
About the youth Young Feminist Manifesto I was mentioning earlier, it has been contributed by national gender youth activists, youth task force members, and fellow feminist activists around the globe. If anyone would like to take a look at it, please, you can have access to the manifesto through the chat box. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing. So as we do have a few more minutes, I would just like to ask if any of the panelists perhaps would have some final words, or perhaps you wanted to speak on a bit more topics, but had some time restraints. So if you would like to share any additional information now, you're also very welcome to do so. We have a raised hand, or is it again?
Now this time I'm raising my hand actually.
Great. Go ahead.
I just wanted to add that as a medical student in Germany, I have also seen an increase on the topic of mental health, increase of importance. And we really need to focus in all ages, from very young age to adolescents, to school students, to university students, everyone. It's just a topic that is not talked about enough. And we just can't stress enough for people to just be open about it. It's like any other health issue. If you have a broken arm or a broken leg, you go to the doctor, and with mental health issues, you have to do the same. And I think it's very important for government and all organizations to stress enough for all their members and everyone to just take care, and for programs to be implemented for a sustainable approach on the topic, because it affects everyone. And the COVID-19 pandemic has showed even a lot more that it's so important, and we really need to take care of that topic and start action now.
Thank you so much. And I think this is a very nice note to finally end our breakout room session. So for now, we will be going back to the plenary room. So to do that, you need to click on the leave room at the bottom of your page and to select leave the breakout room to return to the plenary. The instructions are also in the chat. So see you everyone in the plenary. Bye-bye.